So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you to Elaine and her son Robert for getting her here. I really, really do appreciate the work that you've been doing over the last year. Taking the opportunity to really study the disability community over a year is kind of unheard of. Most people that actually broach this subject spend very little time on it. They mention it, they dabble around it a little bit and move on. I think we see that in the diversity profession a lot, where someone will stand up and talk about the definition of diversity, and they will say the word disability in it, and then you'll never hear anything about people with disabilities for the rest of the time that they speak. And I've spent a lot of time challenging those folks and trying to get them to think more expansively. But if you look around for literature on this, you don't find a lot in comparison to others. And while I know our civil rights movement is a young one compared to others, you would think we would have moved a lot faster and a lot further than we have, given all the folks that have gone before us, but it's not the case. All right, so I feel the need to fess up right away. I'm furious at society. Really, I'm mad at society, whoever society is, because I don't feel like I'm a part of it. I continue to be baffled about why it's taken so long to really include people with disabilities in everything society offers, or rather access to society itself. Now, I'm not going to pretend to sit up here and tell you I know why. I don't. I can't figure it out. I don't have the answers, and I continue to hope that when I speak at an event like this, someone's going to come up and give me an answer, or at least a really good idea. And don't come up at the end and tell me, oh, it's complex, there's many factors. I'm over those types of discussions. Everything's complex, there's many factors. The fact remains, people with disabilities are not included in this society, in this country, and in many other countries. We're not included. And you can pick whatever, you talk about access, you can talk about employment, you can talk about, living independently, you can talk about any aspect of society, and people with disabilities are not included. So if we could make this more of a dialogue, that might be great too. So one thing I do know is true, I feel like Oprah. One thing I know that's true is society as a whole doesn't like people with disabilities. They don't like us. Some of society hates us. They really do, and I see evidence of that a lot of times. We're takers, you can't be takers. Some of society wants to change us, and they think they're doing us a favor, do-gooders. And some of society wishes we were still locked away and, put over here somewhere so they don't have to see us. And there's a whole bunch of people that are still trying to keep that in play, Let's keep those people in institutions. Let's keep those 13 people that are left at Fernald State Institution. Let's keep them there to the tune of $10 million a year to taxpayers. That must be fabulous, keeping those 13 people there. Let's keep those places open. And then there's people in society that just want to take care of us, even if we don't want them to. You're going to do it anyway. So some examples of issues here in Massachusetts, and we're supposed to really be a progressive state, and in some cases we are. But when it comes to people with disabilities, man, there are states that are way beyond us. So, look at the issue of the Judge Rottenberg Center. People know about that? Yeah. Okay. Only in Massachusetts. Only in Massachusetts do we allow this to happen. We allow people to be electrically shocked and institutionalized repeatedly, and nobody else allows this in any other state in the country. And are we the only ones with people with disabilities that have behaviors that need this shocking? Are we the only state? Are they all here? And that's why we need JRC? No. They're in other states. They're in plenty of other states. And yet, you don't see the other states letting an entity like that come in and treat people like that. We'd be arrested, all of us, if we actually did that to a dog in this state. Oh my God, the news story. Fox News, oh my God, they'd be at your house if you were shocking your dog like that. you'd be arrested. There's still lots of access issues. We still keep people institutionalized. Only people with certain types of disabilities actually get services in this state. We have tons and tons and tons and tons and hundreds and millions of people that actually, not hundreds of millions, hundreds and up to millions of people that actually don't get services from our state agencies because we've decided a long time ago, and we hold on to this vehemently, that only people, let's say, with intellectual disabilities, who even within that is a subset, they're people that meet a certain, you know, IQ or something like that. They're the folks that actually get services from, you know, what used to be the Department of Mental Retardation, which is now Developmental Disability Services. What about everybody else? What about someone with an IQ of 75 that needs services? Are they in? Are they out? Well, right now they're out. So there's a lot of issues, and I could talk probably for hours about them, but I'm going to focus on employment because that's the unfulfilled promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA has done very little to help people actually get jobs. It's something we thought was going to happen. If people could be accommodated, if, you know, the law said that you had to do this, then employers would eventually get on board and they would start hiring people with disabilities. Well, it never happened. Now, I will say it's helped people that have jobs keep their jobs by insisting that they get accommodated. So whether they already had a job, they acquired a disability on the job, I think the law has done a lot to help in that regard, but done very little to convince employers that we're ready to enter and contribute as a member of the workforce. Employment to me is the holy grail. To me, and for most people with disabilities, we have seen slow but steady progress with community integration. Well, what's the point of getting people out of institutions and into the community if community integration means sitting in an apartment somewhere, maybe with a couple of other folks with disabilities, probably the same. We like to lump same disabilities together too. Yeah, we can't mix them up. God, you know, that'd be terrible. And then watching TV all day or going to another segregated setting during the day if you're not allowed to stay at the apartment or the house that you live in. So to me, having a place you can go each day where you are learning and refining a skill, contributing as part of a team that isn't all people with disabilities, that's important no matter what your disability is. But it just doesn't happen for most people with significant physical, cognitive, and psychiatric disabilities. So I start asking hard questions, folks. How many people are employed here at BC that have disabilities? How many social workers are there out there with disabilities? Do you see a lot of them? Yeah, raise your hand if you're willing. Someone just raise their hand. Yeah, good, good. I hope that you're open about that with other people. I hope that you actually talk about that. I've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other, especially with hidden disabilities. Don't not talk about it. Talk about it. Talk about it. Tell people. Get them used to the idea that they are working side by side with someone, because that's when things change. When people work together side by side and they understand that you could do the same job and it's got nothing to do with your disability, that's when you start seeing change. People with disabilities continue to be the most unemployed and underemployed people in society. And it isn't just because the economy's bad. In fact, when the economy was great and booming, unemployment for everyone else was non-existent. People with disabilities still were unable to get jobs. 50 to 75% of people with disabilities in this country don't work, despite the fact that they say they would like to. And you hear all different ranges of numbers, you know, could be 50% up to 75%, depends on who's doing the counting and how they count, and people argue over this all the time about the percentages and what it really is, blah, 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 and I just sit there and say, you know what, it's all so high, it's appalling. So who cares if it's 50 or 70%? It doesn't matter to me. It's so high that if it was any other group of people in this country, we'd be doing something about it. We'd all be really squawking about it. But you know what? When it's people with disabilities, society's not so outraged. So we accept this and we do very little to change those numbers. And I told you at the beginning, I don't know why. I I don't have any of the answers, I just have the questions. I would argue also that we've done a relatively good job of educating kids and young adults with disabilities, in this state in particular. Now, I know it's not perfect. The demand for legal representation at the Disability Law Center for special education representation is so high, I could turn that place into an entity that only did special ed cases and still never meet anywhere near the demand. But it's actually got better over time. And despite the remaining problems, we're still getting a lot of kids educated through high school. I think we have one of the higher rates of actual graduation from high school for kids with disabilities. And we have a good number that do go on to college and graduate. Yet after all that, after they walk or roll across the stage and get their diploma, what happens? We tell them to go home, watch TV, because no one will give them a job. So if they can't go home to their parents, we tell them to get on benefits if they aren't already on SSI. And I don't know if you've heard the latest stories about SSI on NPR or no. NPR, our friend. We tell them how to get a subsidized apartment or Section 8, and really what we're telling them is to sit somewhere that we provide for you if you can't go home and play Nintendo or watch TV. I mean, that's what we're telling people to do. So why can't they find jobs like their non-disabled peers? Some of them actually have better grades, better attendance, better references from professors, but they still don't get interviews, or if they do, they don't even get the job. We know from the few employers that do really hire a lot of people with disabilities, they do it mostly, what they learn over time is economically it makes sense. They are more loyal as employees because they know how hard it is to get a job to begin with, so they're not going to be running out there trying to find other ones, although I've bounced around a lot. And therefore, the retention rates are higher than with their non-disabled workers. These employers also report that a worker with a disability is actually more reliable and more dependable. And yet, those are the very things that most employers think we aren't. They think we're going to be a problem. We won't be reliable. We won't be dependable. We can only surmise that it's because of their disability, and in some cases, we know it is because of what the employers actually say when they find out a person has a disability. When I was graduating from BC Law School, I was interviewing, for various jobs, some with firms, and I can't tell you how many times an interviewer, and these interviews were all attorneys, so arguably, a little smart anyway, they would ask me in the interview how I would reach a book on a shelf in the library. What? Really? And I remember sitting there, of course, I would answer them like an idiot. And I would sit there in my mind thinking, oh my God, I'm a third-year law student at BC. I've at least figured that much out. But what I really wanted to say was, oh, I'll go get the most senior partner and ask him to get it for me. That's what I wanted to say. So years later, I was a staff attorney at the Disability Law Center, and I was representing the Law Center at a public interest fair at Harvard Law School. And there were actually 4 of us there that were wheelchair users and recent law school grads. And after talking for a little while, we realized, oh my God, we had all been asked that question repeatedly. So the whole profession, I mean, you think about it. These are lawyers at law firms, lots of different ones. It wasn't like the industry got together and said, let's ask all the wheelchair users this question. This is what they thought of. Oh my God. So I can tell you other stories, but I won't. My point is that just about everyone that has a disability and is interviewed for jobs can tell a similar story. Employees continue to discriminate blatantly at times and only really at this point when the candidate has a disability. And it seems to be okay with society. Society says this is okay. And there are some of us with disabilities who don't even get the opportunity to seek competitive employment. Instead, those folks, mostly with cognitive and developmental disabilities and some with psychiatric disabilities, are told by some case manager in an agency that they can't be trained or taught a skill that will be accepted in the competitive employment world. Those folks are evaluated and told that they're best suited for a job at what's called a sheltered workshop. People know about sheltered workshops? Good. So you've heard about them. These are places, oh, I forgot, wait a second. They just told me recently they changed the name. They're called facility-based employment. I forgot. I think they're always going to be sheltered workshops to me. These are places where you can get work done really cheap. So if any of you know people with businesses and they have repetitive work they want done, this is the deal for you. Really cheap because these folks with disabilities don't even get paid minimum wage. That's right. It is legal in this country to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. Imagine that. The only people in this country that we allow this to happen to. Persons with disabilities have been segregated in sheltered workshops and paid less than minimum wage, usually less than $1 an hour, to do mundane, oh yeah, we're not talking about, you know, they're getting $5, $6 an hour. I'm not talking about that lower, that under minimum wage. I'm talking about really under minimum wage. And they do mundane and repetitive tasks like stuffing envelopes or other types of piecework. And our government thought this was a good idea more than 70 years ago when they established this. And at that time, there really wasn't any hope that people with disabilities could, you know, work or get a job. And so this benign paternalistic system was set up that we could establish places that provided a means of doing something and provide an income for those that could be trained to do repetitive work. But the reality is, we're in 2013 now, sheltered workshops exploit people with disabilities. Businesses that establish these workshops are providers who are paid by the state to actually do this work. And yes, we have quite a few of them here in Massachusetts. And we have lots of companies who have their work done in these settings. And they're told that if they do this, they're helping the handicapped. Isn't that great? And they're told that if they do this, you know, they'll be part of, you know, this wonderful program that, you know, helps these poor people. And we give awards to a lot of these employers. You can go in their offices, they have these plaques up, you know, helping the handicapped year after year by sending their work off to these sheltered workshops. And here's how it works. The federal government and our state government, federal government and the state give out waivers to businesses to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. They're allowed to, you know, do this. They get paid, the person gets paid by how productive they are. So for example, there are professionals that will conduct time tests to determine your productivity, and the rate you get paid is determined by your productivity. So Mary Lou does, you know, so much work per hour, and she gets minimum wage. That's the standard. And then anybody who does less than that is rated at whatever they do. So Mary Lou's stuffing 50 envelopes an hour and I'm only doing 25, I'm gonna get half of that. And it goes down from there. And people are supposed to be regularly tested over time because you get better at these things supposedly, but then that kind of never really happens and, you know, whatever. We just keep paying them, you know, $1 an hour or $1.20 or whatever it is. So can you imagine if we all got tested regularly on our productivity? Huh? What would happen? Huh? Can you imagine us allowing that to happen? That, you know, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks after my mastectomy and they tested my productivity. Probably wouldn't be that good. Oh, okay, Chris, we're gonna now pay you $2 an hour because, you know, you really stink this week, you know, you're just not that productive. We'll test you again in 6 months and see how you're doing and see if we can increase that rate of pay. That's kind of how it works. So we wouldn't tolerate it if someone suggested it happened to us. But again, it's okay to do this to people with disabilities. And this is an issue that's currently being debated here in Washington, D.C. and throughout the country. And you'd be amazed, as I am, the people who continue to argue that it would be just terrible for people with disabilities if we eliminate this program. It would be terrible. what would happen to those people? Well, maybe we should start figuring out how we actually train them to do work in various parts of society, and they can contribute. Maybe that's what we should be doing. And I can assure you one thing, the people that argue vehemently that this needs to stay in place, none of them are people with disabilities. None of them. And there are many places that do more than exploit people with disabilities by paying less than minimum wage. There have been countless stories, I hope you've seen them, about businesses that have taken in groups of people with developmental disabilities to do mundane work, like plucking chicken feathers, and they will house them in horrific conditions, such as a barn-like residence, and then they'll even, from the meager wage they give them, they'll deduct money for food and shelter. Imagine that? So now you get nothing, and you really, folks are locked into whatever this situation is, because they can really go nowhere. And our government gave them a waiver to do this, and yet failed to check on a regular basis to see what was happening. So these are the types of situations that make me ask again and again, why doesn't society like people with disabilities? And why do they get mad at us when we speak up and ask for equality? Because they do. We were just talking at the table. I was just relaying an incident that happened when a bunch of us were protesting how some state officials were going to use some substantial funding that the federal government had given them to, of course, work and help demonstrate that people with disabilities could live independently. Yeah, we're going to spend, another $5 million demonstrating, but they weren't going to actually get people to live independently. We were going to study it. We were going to do trainings. We were going to do all sorts of stuff, which we keep doing over and over and over. We keep studying. We keep training people. We do sensitivity training. How many people have gone to sensitivity training? Huh? And you've learned about those words we like and we don't like, and yet, oh my God, we've been doing it for, 50, 60 years. And I still see proposals come through for money. Let's do sensitivity training. Let's talk to emergency room doctors and sensitivity training. No, let's talk to these people over here and do sensitivity. Meanwhile, everyone's spending money doing sensitivity training and other trainings, and people with disabilities are still languishing in sheltered workshops and crappy institutions. It's like, we're not getting this. So again, I don't have the answers. But I know that as social workers that you are seeing or going to see what happens to people with disabilities in the various places that you work. You're already seeing it. So please don't be fooled into thinking that you're part of a system that's helping people with disabilities if you are seeing them in any segregated setting. Don't believe it when you're told they like it this way. They're happy this way. I hear that all the time. Oh, my brother's really happy in a sheltered workshop. Really? Did your brother ever get shown any other options? Did your brother ever, did anyone take him to the local, Stop and Shop? Do they exist anymore? I don't even know. Shaw's, whatever. Supermarket, Whole Foods, and maybe see if there are things that he or she could do there. Was your sibling shown any other, options? Or is it really you're happy with the segregated workshop? You're happy because that's safe for you. You feel good about it. And that's usually the case. So don't get fooled by people that say, oh, Joe's really happy doing stuff in those envelopes and getting, 50 cents an hour. It isn't true. It isn't true. And there's a lot of science and data that proves that real integration, inclusion, and equality is what makes people happy. So please be advocates for your clients. Speak up and ask why. When you see people with disabilities being segregated in any aspect of their life, ask why. Why are we doing this? Why does this make sense? And be aware that when you see segregation, it may be the most cost-effective way an agency can manage the people they're supposed to be serving. But it doesn't mean it's good for people with disabilities. In fact, it isn't good for society either. Society just hasn't figured that out yet. So I think someday we will realize that full inclusion of people with disabilities will benefit us all, but we have a long, long way to go. So thank you.